Good morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 1079 FM, and respective radio stations island-wide. Also to the TEL TV Plus viewers and Channel 15 viewers and online viewers. I'm Charity Dunker, and welcome to the Live Council Ministers Press Briefing for today, Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. At this time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Melissa Gums, to address you. Good morning, Minister. You have the floor.
Good morning and thank you. And good morning to everyone again. I just have some brief updates for today's press briefing, starting with the FBE review. I've taken note, and the ministry has taken note of comments and statements on the difficulties encountered by students during the FBE exams, particularly the Dutch exams. While I fully understand the frustrations expressed, as I have heard the concerns of parents and educators during the town hall meetings by the CLIMB Foundation, as part of the FBE review, as I stated previously, the data collection portion of that review is now complete. Currently, the CLIMB Foundation is finalizing the data, analyzing it, and preparing a report that should be delivered to the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport before the end of 2025. And once that report is received, there will be recommendations and solutions moving forward on how we can adjust and adapt the existing FBE curriculum and methodology to better suit our students' needs and the needs of the country. With regards to vacation pay, as the Minister of Finance communicated to the public earlier this week, subsidized school boards have received the payout of the vacation pay. The responsibility for paying this out to subsidized school teachers now rests with the boards, and I join the Minister of Finance in urging all school boards to disburse this payment to the subsidized school teachers within soonest. And finally, on the fun side, the Dame Ruby Buttes National Short Story Contest, its first edition, is officially a go. The promotional work has been launched as of a week and a half ago. And yesterday I announced the prizes, and I will repeat them here for the general public's knowledge. The Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, has come on to offer bank accounts for the winners for first, second, and third prize, each with a significant starting amount. The intention is, of course, for these bank accounts to lead to improved financial literacy and financial stability for the winners. We additionally have Bullchance Antic and Class Electronics that have donated tech prizes to aid in digital literacy and in their writing careers. The contest is open for children ages 12 to 14, and the theme is Guardians of the Great Salt Pond, based on the concept of Caribbean futurism, where they can tailor their short stories to explain how they would incorporate thematic culture and technology in protecting our cultural heritage, which the ministry found important to do for this, the first iteration of the short story contest. And that is all the updates I have for today.
Okay. Thank you, Honorable Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, Melissa Gums. At this time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of Finance, Marinka Gums, to address you. Good morning, Minister. You have the floor.
Good morning, Charity, fellow colleague ministers, members of the press, and to the people of St. Martin, good morning and blessed day to all. I want to take this opportunity to provide you with important updates on several key matters. Allow me to begin with an update on the first quarter financials results for 2025. Total revenue during Q1 amounted to 162 million guilders, exceeding projections by 15 million guilders. This positive variance is mainly driven by a 14 million guilder increase in tax revenues. On the expenditure side, total expenses were 19 million guilders below budget. This is largely due to a 13 million guilder in lower personnel costs. However, we do anticipate a rise in personnel expenses in the coming quarters following the enactment of the 2025 budget, particularly due to the payments of vacation allowances in Q2 and the retroactive indexation scheduled for payout to all civil servants in July 2025. The profit for the first quarter is a surplus of 38 million guilders. While we remain cautiously optimistic, it is important to note that Q1 and Q4 are traditionally the strongest revenue quarters. At the same time, we must remain vigilant as major financial obligations, including loan repayments, are scheduled primarily for Q3. Regarding the hot topic on the dividend withholding tax, I have previously provided clarity and reiterated that this measure will not increase the domestic tax burden for residents or local businesses. I wish to emphasize that the topic of dividend tax, along with broader tax reform measures such as the retraction of outdated taxes, profit tax reform, retraction of turnover tax exemption for casinos, and others, has been part of stakeholder consultations over past years, specifically since 2022 under the TWO project. What we must realize, however, is that discussion alone does not result in change. As Minister of Finance, I made a decision to move beyond dialogue and begin implementation. The introduction of this dividends withholding tax is the result of a deliberate policy choice aimed at ensuring fairness, requiring foreign investors who benefit from the local economy to contribute their fair share. It was recently claimed that this measure came out of the woodworks and that no discussions were held with stakeholders. I clarified this matter. Discussions were in fact held over several years with key stakeholders. What did not happen was a decision. Many matters are discussed, but ultimately parked. The difference now is that I, along with my team and the Ministry of Finance, have chosen to act. In order for our country to evolve and for us to provide meaningful relief to St. Martin businesses and residents through reductions in the profit tax and wage tax, actual decisions must be taken. That is precisely what I am doing. If we truly want to improve critical social sectors such as education, healthcare, infrastructure, and mental health services, we must acknowledge that sustainable progress demands meaningful investment in St. Martin. What we cannot do is we can no longer continue to have champagne dreams on bare budgets. In the coming weeks, the retraction law will be submitted to Parliament to formally withdraw two tax ordinances that, while still legally in effect, are not being enforced and will not be in the future. These are the Inheritance Tax Ordinance and the Land Tax Ordinance. This legislative step is being taken to create legal certainty and clarity, both for our local residents and for potential investors. Eliminating outdated and unused laws helps build confidence in our legal and fiscal framework. As I have stated before, it is time to move beyond discussions. For too long, we have talked about reform. Now it is time for action. With this retraction, we are demonstrating a commitment to meaningful, practical tax reform for the benefit of the country. I look forward to presenting and defending this legislation before Parliament in the third quarter of this year. And on to two other topics. As you're aware, this month is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, a time to break the silence surrounding the emotional struggles our men often endure alone. Too many are taught to suppress their pain, fearing judgment if they show vulnerability. But vulnerability is not weakness, it is courage. A powerful reminder of this came to me this weekend by Renee Cotto Wilson, whose heartfelt post and poem, A Man's Pain, gave voice to the silent battles many men face. His bravery is a call for all of us to listen, support, and act. We must challenge outdated stigmas, promote open conversation, and create safe spaces where our men feel truly seen and heard. I also want to commend the ongoing hard work of the St. Martin Mental Health Foundation, whose dedication professionals continue to serve with care despite many challenges. As we raise awareness, let us remember we often expect others to tell us what they're going through. Perhaps it's time we dare to ask, how are you really doing? Let us stand united in making mental health a shared priority, not just this month, but every day. And finally, I want to offer words of congratulations as it brings me immense pride, and I'm sure that of the Minister of Education as well, and joy to extend heartfelt congratulations to all of our graduates and students who have been promoted this academic year. Your achievements are a reflection of dedication, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of our youth. Today, we celebrate the extraordinary accomplishments of several shining examples, namely Anzario Serrant, who has completed an exceptional academic journey, earning a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science, a Bachelor of Law in Global Law, a Master's of Law in Business Law, a Master's of Law in International Business Taxation, and a Juris Doctor, demonstrating what is possible with with vision and perseverance. Sharina David, who has conquered not one, but 2 master's degrees in public health with concentrations in epidemiology, biostatistics, and health administration and leadership. Her achievement was shaped by long nights and unshakable support. Miruhia Richardson have now obtained her bachelor's degree in education, steps into one of the most noble professions, teaching. As a society, we must continue to uplift and honor our educators who carry the responsibility of shaping minds and nurturing the next generation. And I proudly recognize Mr. Tyreek Heiliger, the first high school graduate of Ocean View Academy. Tyreek's grit and determination to graduate this June 2025 is commendable, and his journey reminds us of the importance of small, supportive, and nurturing learning environments that offer one-on-one attention in a family-like atmosphere where students are truly seen and encouraged to thrive. To all graduates, continue to walk in your purpose. And to those who may have fallen short of the grade, do not be discouraged. Your journey is far from over, and your resilience today is the foundation of tomorrow's success. I am proud of you all. I would like to note that tomorrow I return, along with my colleague ministers and the Honorable Prime Minister, to Parliament for the continuation of the public sessions on Budget 2025. I look forward to a constructive debate, and I remain hopeful that we will soon have an enacted budget in place to guide the financial trajectory of our country. As Minister of Finance, I remain committed to being transparent. I will continue to provide regular updates as we move forward on these important matters and welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Finance, Marinka Gums, for your opening remarks and also those kind words of congratulatory to the students. Moving forward, the Honorable Minister of Romy, Patrice Gums Jr., is present, however, does not have any opening remarks, but is available for any questions members of the media may have. At this time, I'd like to move on to the question and answer session by starting with Ms. Bibi Hardshaw of SMN News. You have the floor.
Good morning, colleagues, ministers. My first question is Minister of Romy, please. Minister, I'd like you to provide some information and shed light, because I've been getting some information, but I do not know if the information I have is correct. The emergency debris project, the bidding process, I understood, was stopped. So the 2 Arubian company were able to participate in the bidding process after your visit to Aruba, and they ultimately won the bids. Can you also give us shed some light as to why you and the SG had to travel to the Netherlands on an emergency note, and who exactly are footing the bills of these traveling expenses because you're traveling with NRPB?
Thank you so much for the question, Bibi. Let me clarify, because I've done this on the floor of Parliament, but I think it still seems to live a very interesting life. No bidding process was stopped by the minister. Contrary to what is actually being put out there was actually no knowledge of any of the companies who were bidding when we visited Aruba. Why we visited Aruba is because, of course, we're busy with the whole entire idea of a, excuse me, circular economy, which is a massive part of what we're trying to do with our waste reforms. As it relates to who won the bid, this process is still ongoing, as stated last week, as well by the clarifications of the NRPB on this subject. And until that process is complete and we make a decision, I'll then come back to answer the story about the outcome of the full bidding process. But for the record, I did not stop any bidding. I did not intervene in any bidding. And that's pretty much all I can say for now regarding that. Regarding the emergency debris, the emergency travel to the Netherlands 2 weeks ago, or last week, 2 weeks ago actually, the rationale for that was, of course, as you imagine, EDMP, which is the Emergency Debris Management Program on the landfill, has been delayed for about 2 years now. The amount of work that we have done in the last 11 months alone has actually made it tremendously impactful. We're actually at the point now where we're making a number of decisions about the final intervention plan on the landfill, and that needed to be decided with an emergency steering committee meeting that happened in the Netherlands. Second to that, there was also a discussion regarding cooperation with foreign countries and whatever agreements may have to take place in that context. We also had meetings with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Affairs, as well as I had meetings separate to the entire EDMP project with other various ministries within the Netherlands on different topics within the Ministry of Rumi.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Bibi, for that. Moving on to Mr. Emily of Island 92. You have the floor.
My question's for the Minister of Finance.
Oh.
So actually, my question relates to an article or a post that was made where on May 30th, you visited the prison in your capacity as acting Minister of Justice in order to do an on-site assessment. So there's been comments in the newspaper from the legal representatives of the Inmates Association saying the conditions are inhumane, but then there's been releases from the Ministry of Justice, which seems to paint a very different picture. So it's very unclear, at least to me, what are the conditions actually like at the prison. So since you visited, would you find, so 3 specific questions. Do you find the conditions in the prison acceptable? Do you find them to be humane? And do you find them to be conducive to rehabilitation of the prisoners there?
Mr. Lee, can you, the third?
Do you find the conditions to be acceptable?
Humane.
Do you find them to be humane? And do you find it to be conducive to the rehabilitation of the prisoners that are there, the inmates?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Lee. Yes, so I visited the prison. Actually, that was on recommendation by the Minister of Justice, and I welcomed that visit. It was not what I expected because, first of all, that was my first time attending or visiting the prison. What I can say from my observation, clearly there has been a lot of work put in, and I have to give credit where it's due. There was a lot that took place under the Minister of Justice in trying to get this matter to where it's at today. As you know, most of the prisoners have returned to Point Blanche. When I visited, there was a lot of work that was necessary to have them return to the prison in a timely manner. So at that point, not acceptable. At that point. However, I haven't visited since then, and I am sure that the team, along with the Ministry of Justice, knowing the conditions that the prison was in, would not have allowed them to return unless it was in a more acceptable position. Humane as well. You know, there's a reason why we need to do a full reconstruction of the Point Blanche prison, because you want to make sure that the prisoners are in a environment that is very much humane, but that some of the discussions that I had with 1 or 2 inmates while I was there was very interesting. And this one inmate made a reference of rehabilitation. And I could totally understand where he was coming from, because what you don't want is you don't want to continue having persons go in and out of the system and not be rehabilitated, to be allowed back into society and be to perform to the best of their ability. And this particular prisoner resonated greatly with me, because he said, we need to do something. We need to do something and not continue to, and he used the words, create further prisoners within. He talked about different things that he believed prisoners can do while incarcerated, in terms of with the use of their hands, even going back to school. I know that there was a GED program at the prison. I am not sure if it has continued since the entire fire. Nevertheless, today I can say that because they're there, they have returned. I want to believe that it's acceptable. I cannot confirm that, but I want to believe that it is, because I don't think that the Minister of Justice would have allowed going back to the prison if it wasn't also in a humane position, and we definitely need to focus further on the rehabilitation.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, ML. And now for round two, moving on to Ms. Bibi Hadshaw. SMN News, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll call back the Minister of Romy, please. Minister, can you give us an update on the status of the road hard surfacing project, and how much did it cost government for the sargassum cleanup thus far? And you failed to tell me about the cost of the traveling when you're traveling with NRPB for their projects. Is government covering the cost while these are NRPB projects? And at the same time, if you can tell us, what is your traveling expenses thus far?
Thanks, Phoebe. Can you repeat the first question before the sargassum?
The status of the road hard surfacing and the cost of the sargassum cleanup. And then the question before, I asked you about the NRPB traveling, who is covering this cost, and what is your traveling expenses since taking office?
Thank you, Bibi. So the status of the road hard surfacing project, we are currently, as we know, finalizing the area of Coal Bay. Most of the roads are complete. They should be completed actually by the end of summer for this first phase of the project. We are, of course, still working on finalizing Manjack Drive, which is, of course, one of the things that has been long lingering. I've already contacted the Maku family about it, that they will, of course, be part of the hard surfacing project. The problem, of course, we have is that the road has to be a certain width. So we are already indicated to both parties, because both persons have to do a check on if they're actually within their bound. And then that's going to be finalized, and the road will be part of the project as well. So everything is on track. Of course, there are some issues with that particular road, given what we know and has discussed in the past, but we are making sure that everybody in that area is addressed. In the second phase, the idea is how the project was created and phased was that we would do, of course, partial hard surfacing of all the roads. The second phase would be the second half of the roads. One of the things that we've intervened and tried to make sure that we have done, I've spoken about it several times, is the need for drainage in the Kobe area. So part of that project now, well, not part of it, a separate part of that project, so a complementary part of that project now will be that we have a project planned for summertime for the introduction of drainage under parts of Union Road. I think I've said it's time and time again, it's very nice to hard surface a road. It's a great initiative, but we don't want to push the problem further down the road, literally. So the drainage is really critical to ensuring that this project is holistic and comprehensive. Regarding the sargassum cost, let me get back to you on that. I don't have that information readily available. Regarding who pays, government pays. These are not NRPB projects. And I think it's something that several governments have done in the past, where when the project is a success, it's government's project, and when it fails or there's problems, it becomes NRPB or the World Bank's projects. It's all government's projects. When it comes to why is NRPB not paying, because the projects are part of our operational budget. NRPB's budget is part of their operational costs, so they fund that through their operations. All travel to two trust fund projects is funded from the national budget of the government of St. Martin. What is covered outside of that is training specifically for civil servants, not necessarily the minister because it becomes political, to attend training, seminars that help in the implementation, execution of the projects in the long term. But again, I want to remind everybody in the country, these are not World Bank projects, they're not NRPB projects, they're government of St. Martin, they're our projects. And we have to take ownership, whether they be good or bad outcomes. And then finally, the total expenses for my travel. Let me also share that with you, because I know it's part of the questions asked by the MPs in Parliament. I don't have it at hand at the moment, so I'll share it with you as soon as I can get the information as well. So let me send a WhatsApp to my team and come back.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes,
Thank you. As I ask about these road projects, I'd like to know if Well Road was finally paved and if there is drainage in Well Road. And recently I saw the prosecutor's office published a press release about Windward Road completing I think they were given a $2 million fine in the Larimar case, and they completed. And immediately after that was published, I got a bunch of calls from people in Dutch Quarter because they were supposed to be investing in Dutch Quarter. There's still sewage running in there, you know, and people are saying, yeah, you're saying that you finished what ought to be done, but a Dutch Water project is still far from being finished. How do you address that?
Yes. No, thank you. So on the topic of Well Road has not been paved yet, and no, there's no drainage. Well Road will form part of the next set of CapEx that we request. The current CapEx for the resurfacing project is almost complete. The amount of money we need for Well Road exceeds what's currently available. Thus, we're gonna, when we do the new CapEx request upcoming, that'll be put in as a priority road, because we know while Well Road might not be a main road, it operates as such, and it's a very great diversion to get in and out of Cole Bay, Simpson Bay areas. Regarding Windward Roads, indeed, the project, there's several parts of this project. The first part, of course, is the fixing of the pump at the corner by the roundabout. That has been originally handed over to the government, and then in the handover, seemingly a number of things malfunctioned. So currently what's happening is that Windward Roads is still involved in the project, despite it being handed to government, because essentially a number of things that were supposed to be part of the checks still managed to malfunction after the fact. So the project regarding the pump itself is still ongoing to remedy those problems. Regarding the household connections, that's something that we're actually tendering now, as I stated in Parliament. We're now, not tendering, sorry, scheduling into the works for the upcoming year to begin the household connections, that all the houses in Dutch Quarter will connect finally to the sewage line on the main road and then connect to pump over the hill.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Bibi. Moving on to Mr. Emily of Island 92. You have the floor.
My question is for the Minister of Education. I'm sure you've taken note. There's been a couple articles in the newspapers about, in particular, St. Dominic's school, where teachers are talking about a culture that's not conducive neither for the teachers and thereby also neither for the students. I believe you made a comment that the Catholic schools fall a little bit outside your purview, so perhaps you could explain, number one, your impression of what's happening, what your plans are. And since you're saying that this falls outside your purview, so perhaps you can also explain to the public, there's a number of private schools. The Minister of Finance mentioned the Ocean View Academy, but also Learning Unlimited, CIA. Those are private schools. And then you have a number of Catholic schools. So how do you, as Minister of Education, really manage the education process?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Lee. So essentially, I think there's confusion about how our education system has been allowed to be structured over decades, actually. You have your public schools, which fall directly under the management and, for lack of a softer word, control of the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport. And then somewhere along the lines, it was decided to set up subsidized school boards as well, and to allow persons who would like to establish a different education trajectory or pathway to start a school board and then receive government subsidy. The initial classification was that they were semi-private, but I think we can all agree that they are pretty much fully subsidized, which in a normal world would make them public schools. Ultimately, the ministry's control or influence over the day-to-day management of these subsidized schools is nil. The ministry is responsible for educational policy. We are bringing in Q3 of 2025, as I mentioned in the Central Committee of the Budget debate, the supervision of education law, which will give some additional insight into the overall management and status of the subsidized school boards. Not that it gives us day-to-day operational control or responsibility, but it will allow for the ministry to have higher levels of accountability, including academic accountability, when it comes to these institutions that receive considerable public money. Ultimately, the situation at the Catholic schools is very disheartening for me as an alumni of St. Dominic High School. However, that is for the parents and educators and the school board to solve. I'm a person who professionally believes that boards and entities need to have a refresh every few years. However, that is not something that I, as the minister, can actually execute when it comes to the subsidized school boards. So I would urge that all parties come to the table and have a conversation. And perhaps it is time for a moment of self-reflection for all involved to see how they can best solve this. Because at the end of the day, who suffers and who is the entity that I'm most concerned with is the students. Because you are facing a scenario where the school year is close to beginning and you're trying to recruit essentially your entire teaching staff. And that is a challenge that the ministry unfortunately cannot help them overcome, because we are not responsible for the recruitment of subsidized school teachers.
Thank you,
If I might
Minister.
ask just two clarification questions. So are there no requirements or conditions to the subsidies that you're giving to these semi-private schools? I mean, isn't that the person who controls the purse has got a lot of leverage, right?
Yes, one would hope. And this is something I have raised in Parliament as well. Interestingly enough, regarding this exact same school board, when I was a member of Parliament, to the then Minister of Education, the subsidy ordinance requires that you financially report. That's it. You just have to report on the financials. There's no further influence that the ministry or government holds over the subsidized school boards. And this is something that we are looking to rectify, because ultimately, I agree, as they say in the Netherlands, we betaal bepaalt. And that is something that I think we need to get very realistic with. This is public money at the end of the day. And that is something that I have been concerned about. But the education supervision law that will be coming will address many of these concerns, and it will also include the provisions for the hair discrimination that I mentioned in Parliament. We've decided to incorporate it into that existing ordinance, since that is already on its way to Parliament, so that can also be taken up as we continue with trying to reshape education into a system that benefits the students.
So just the other clarification on the recruitment process, one of the comments that I've heard from schools is that there's clearly a need for teachers, but the work permitting process is so troublesome that very often the teachers don't arrive in time for schools.
Yes.
So is that something that you can
Yes,
work
and
on?
I've shared this with Parliament as well. There is a meeting once we are done with this round 2, 3, I'm not sure, of the budget, 2025. There will be a meeting between myself, the Minister of VSA, and the Minister of Justice to try to streamline this process. The school boards have shared this concern with me. So far, what we have agreed to is that if there are pending applications, they send it to the Ministry of ECYS, and we will send it on to the Minister of Justice. And she has been handling those as rapidly as we get them. But it is, there's quite a bit of intersectionality between the three ministries. But we are working on having some type of resolution where at least education-related permits can be fast-tracked.
Okay. Thank you, Minister, and also thank you, Emily. Moving on to our third round. Ms. Bibi Hod Shah of SMN News, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm taking the Minister of ECYS. Based on your last statement, because quite some schools and teachers have contacted me personally for a long period of time, my understanding, it's not the working permit that is giving the issue with teachers, but in most cases, it's the residence permit
Yes.
as well as the landing permit. Because as much as that you may get a working permit, sometimes it takes as long as 6 months to a year before you can actually get the residence and landing permit. Most of these schools, there are recruiting from the Caribbean islands, and this is something that you get. Even the Charlotte Brookson, they had a bunch of teachers there working without documentation. Foreign teachers working without documentation, without SZV. How does the ministry plan to address this issue and to make sure that all teachers are regulated on the island?
Well, again, thank you, Bibi, for the question. And again, as I said, that's why the Minister of Justice and I have been trying to collaborate on the matter of the immigration and landing permit. Where it comes to Charlotte Brookson Academy, that I believe would be a matter for the Ministries of Justice and Labor to address. Ultimately, we have no role in the recruitment of subsidized school teachers. Charlotte Brookson is a subsidized school board. And it is their responsibility to ensure that their teachers have their necessary documentation. I have heard from the Minister of Justice in our conversations that there have been subsidized schools that have teachers that are here without the proper documentation, that have not reached out to communicate that this is a challenge. So this is something I'm also urging the school boards to be up to date with and up to speed with. This is part of the administrative responsibility, of course, when it comes to recruitment. Like any other entity or company would have to be responsible for. So that is for them to address with those ministries.
Minister, can you also give us an update on the 2 directors that was removed or put somewhere else from the POAS situation? I know you gave a breakdown, but the part I'm looking for is what happened to the 2 directors that was displaced. Are they now at another location, and are they teaching as usual?
So there is the original director of POAS has been reinstated. And that is something that I have stated to the Parliament as well, and the POAS staff. And further to that, I don't get into the business of revealing HR and personnel-related matters of others within government. I think it's not my role to do that. But the actual director of POAS has been reinstated as per her LB.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Bibi. Moving on to Mr. Emily of Island 92. You have the floor.
Back to our Minister of Finance. So, Minister, you in your opening statement, you referred to the dividend tax and that it will not increase the tax burden for domestic businesses or residents, right? So, and that foreign investors are the intended payees of this tax. But for a business to operate in St. Martin, they need to be registered and therefore become a local entity. So perhaps, I think for most people, they don't really understand what this dividend tax is intended. So can you give us an example, a fictitious example of who you're actually trying to target, and how have they been not targeted before? How have they not been compliant before?
So thank you for your question, Mr. Lee. As I stated, with dividend tax or the dividend withholding tax, it is also about us being fair. For too long, we have been putting the burden on the people of St. Martin. As I stated in my opening, we have 14 million in additional revenue due to taxes alone. So you can imagine that my intention overall is to try to find ways in which we can, first of all, lower wage tax. That is something that I'm very keen on, as well as to lower profit tax. Okay? Now, you have shareholders that may be abroad, and therein lies the situation. You are abroad, and then you do not, you're not paying into the dividend tax. And so for that, that's my target. Because if you're here and you're local, there are ways in which you can get credit for dividends tax. And let me give you a fictitious. So let's say, for example, you have a profit, and at the end you decide you wanna declare 5,000 in dividends tax. You declare that 5,000. I say, well, based on this law, we want to implement getting a 10%. 10% of 5,000 is 500. 500 then comes to the tax office. Great. From that, You then go ahead and you file your income tax. When you file your income tax, you're going to file on that same 5,000. But the difference is the rate that 5,000 in terms of percentage that is attached to that 5,000 now. It could be anywhere to the tune of, I think, 16%, 16 point something percent, which you would then have to pay a total of 900 and about 37. But you already paid your 500. So now you would only have to pay 437. I hope that brings some clarity because truthfully, I think the statement that I am focusing only on local business and local business is going to be a burden, that is not the truth of the situation. As I just explained, they can receive a credit. And then again, we need to stop this thing of expecting, like I stated, we want the best in education. My minister can affirm to that. We want the best in infrastructure. We have a mental health situation on St. Martin, whether we want to accept it or not. We also have a health situation on St. Martin. And so we want to get to a level of providing the best. But I think as a council, then we really need to sit down and ascertain what that level of best is. Because like I stated in my opening, we cannot continue on champagne dreams within a bare budget. I hope that brings some clarity. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you, ML. Into our fourth and final round of questions.
Okay,
Ms.
Min
Bibi
Fin.
Haj Shah, you have the floor.
I'll call Minister of Finance, and it's to ask her, I think you mentioned it, but if you can give me some details regarding the COLA payment. I think is it 2 plus the 1%. How far are we? I know they got their vacation, and like our colleague said, it's almost done or it's done already, so they're still waiting on their COLA.
I understand, and I do understand that it could almost be finished, if not finished for some. But the 2% indexation that will be paid out in the month of July. However, in the month of June, and I mean retroactive January through May, will be paid out in the month of July. However, in the month of June, you will see exactly what that indexation amount should be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Emily of Mr. Emily of Island 92 Radio, you have the floor.
For our Minister of Education. Many students have just completed the FBE exams. You mentioned something in your opening statement about a report. I'm not really clear what that report will entail, but in theory, the FBE exams should be an objective measure of how the students moving from primary school to secondary school, how they're performing. So will you make an analysis of the results to show, what is the track of the results of students over the past couple years, so you can see if there's a tendency, for example, for math to improve or decline? And will you make that public?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So upon swearing in, one of the first things that I initiated was a comprehensive review of our foundation-based education system. That has been executed by the Climb Foundation. They have held town halls. They have interviewed teachers, school boards, school managers, ministry staff, former ministers of education, a host of persons attached to our education ecosystem, the originators and implementers of the foundation-based education methodology. They held town halls for parents. I attended most of the town halls. They held online town halls. And that data collection period is now over. That has been ongoing since about January. And as I mentioned to Parliament in March, that this review, the report that comes out of this review is going to form the basis of the ministry's future vision for foundation-based education. We've heard persons say it has to go away, okay, but you cannot make such a decision without data. That data should be provided to me in that report by November, hopefully, but by end of the year, nonetheless. I've heard both Dr. Boston and Dr. Pierre make a joke that it might be 1,000 pages. If it is, then we will read it. And in that report will come recommendations and possible solutions of whether we have to adapt FBE, how do we have to adapt it, and how can we make it so that it is not a stressor for kids, that it is something that is a fair measure and that is not the be-all, end-all. Standardized testing is something that has received a bad rap over the years in many countries, even in the United States. There is commentary on how they test students. You cannot measure everyone with the same stick. But ultimately, having seen the FBE exams, because of course FBE was not around when I was in elementary school, but having seen some, I would actually challenge every parent and everyone who thinks that it is a normal way to test children to take the test. Because I doubt that I would be able to pass muster. So once we have those recommendations, the ministry is going to categorize them into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. I do not like to do many things at the same time. I think that is a recipe for failure and disaster, and then we will see how we can adjust moving forward. And of course, any changes will come with costs, so we also have to see what we can do within our budget and what is feasible. Of course, as Minfin mentioned, with her dividend tax, hopefully that'll be a little easier to get to.
So just for clarification, will you make that report public?
The report, maybe not the entire report, I'm not sure. I will first see what the report contains. We will analyze the report and then we will possibly make it public, because I don't believe there will be anything confidential. But if there are personal statements, professional statements from individuals in the system, those we will not make public.
And in your campaign manifestos, you refer in your first year to integrating STEAM philosophy or approach into the learning. How does this dovetail into your report?
So there has been conversation that we need to roll out STEAM methodology into our elementary school system. And I think people think STEAM is putting a smart board in a room when actually it is not. STEAM is utilizing the science, technology, engineering, and math and art into learning about business. For example, into learning about English, into learning math, gamification of these subjects as well. On my school tours, I have seen some teachers that incorporate this already on their own in their class. Really amazing ways to teach math, to teach English that engages the kids in a learning format that they are acceptable to. The intention of the ministry is to use the FBE review results to use our plans to roll out an actual STEAM methodology approach to education, to kind of marry the two and see how we can move forward. Because it's not just about devices, it is about a mindset, actually. And that comes with teacher training, that comes with a mental shift in moving away from there's the board, this is the class, and you have to sit and stare at it all day. So that is part of what the review will contain, because it also included a curriculum review. I didn't mention that earlier, but yeah.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to all the ministers for your response to the questions posed by the members of the media. I would also like to thank the members of the media for being a part of today's press briefing. This brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing. But once again, honorable ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, also the online viewers and all the television viewers as well, TeleTV Plus, Channel 15, official Facebook page. Remember to visit that as well for rebroadcast, video on demand, St. Martin Gov, and also the YouTube channel of St. Martin Gov. Government of St. Martin, for video on demand. This brings us to the end, as was mentioned previously. On behalf of our Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Charity Dunker. Thank you very much for tuning in.